Hello, I'm Heidi Pickett, Chief of Staff and SVP of Strategic Initiatives at the TIE, and I'm excited to be joined by Colin, Global Head of Institutional Capital, and Matt, VP of Institutional Capital, both from Polygon Labs for the 5th edition of our quarterly State of Polygon call. So today we're going to cover several topics, starting with collaborations and ecosystem developments before discussing some of the network's technical upgrades and things to watch out for the rest of the year. Just a reminder, the information contained in this webinar is for informational purposes only and should not be intended as investment advice. Okay, with that out of the way, welcome Colin and Matt. Great to be able to speak with you again this quarter. So Matt, kicking it off with you. Polygon has made some significant progress towards the Polygon 2.0 vision, which I know you're super excited about and love to talk about. The launch of the unified bridge for the ag layer in January was an exciting milestone for the team and community. Why don't you start by giving us a refresher on what is the ag layer and describe the significance of this unified bridge?
Thanks, Heidi. Yeah, so I think it really starts with zooming out and thinking about the Ethereum roadmap and just broadly speaking scalability, right? So what we've seen at Polygon over the last year or so is that there's immense demand to build and use new layer 2s. They inherit the security of Ethereum. They enable like truly elastic demand for block space in a way that like Web 2, cloud infrastructure enabled easy scaling for web applications. We think layer 2s and ZK layer 2s are going to enable a similar kind of scalability for Web3 applications. And so you start to hit some issues there, though, right? Like, we think it's going to be a world with hundreds or thousands of L2s and not like one or two. And so what happens to the user experience is when you have like differing trust assumptions with things like optimistic rollups, you wind up having to bridge and bridge on and bridge off, and it can take time or it can cost money. Somebody's always sort of like bearing the cost of switching security contexts, if you think of it that way. With ZK, we can kind of address this, right? So ZK rollups, they inherit the security of Ethereum sort of mechanically in a way. So you no longer have to trust in like a trusted operator or a set of operators to maintain the security of your assets. Instead, you can trust the cryptographic math underlying ZK. That's all fine and dandy. But the thing is, you still have to bridge on and off. It's still a pain in the ass. It still fragments the users, fragments liquidity, fragments the community, and it fragments attention. And so the ag layer is really the solution to all of these issues. So this is what's like the most exciting thing of Polygon for me right now, because it addresses a lot of these like very real user experience problems that we've had so far. So the ag layer will enable first safe, secure bridging, right? This is like a super necessary part of, I'm getting the AI thumbs up. Wow. This is, yeah, I'm excited, but you didn't know I was that excited. What does this do? It enables first like safe transfer of assets. That means the liquidity is no longer going to be fragmented. You're no longer going to have to worry about where your assets are. If you want to play a game on one of the chains or interact with a dApp on another chain, you never really have to worry about where you are because all of your security is guaranteed through ZK, right? The second thing that this enables is cross-chain applications, right? So you can imagine a user with an asset on one chain wanting to swap it for an NFT on another. You can have bridge and call functions that allow you to bridge your asset and then call something once it gets there. And that's going to enable application developers to focus on building what they want to build, which is like the core of their application. To date, if you've had a specific L2, like an app-specific L2, you had to also bootstrap like a DeFi ecosystem. If you want meme coins, then you have to have meme coins on your chain. And so far, most L2 developers have been hamstrung by this because they're getting distracted in terms of like, where do they focus? It's not easy to bootstrap a DeFi ecosystem, right? And so I think what's so exciting about Polygon 2.0 and the ag layer in particular is it enables you to just focus on what you're good at. You want to build a game, you build your game, and you let the DeFi ecosystem flourish on the DeFi chain, right? You let borrow-lend flourish on the borrow-lend chain. You let your users interact with NFTs on the NFT chain. And you can do all of this safely for the first time ever, thanks to the ag layer. So we had the sort of first step to answer your original question. We had this sort of first step, which was deploying the unified bridge. And so this is like a shared smart contract that connects Ethereum to all of the L2s in the Polygon Aglair ecosystem, right? And before this, or like with the current setup with like optimistic rollups, you can clone the code base, but every chain needs to operate its own bridge to and from Ethereum. Now we have chains plugged in, and it's actually really cool. You can see it in the Etherscan. You can look at number of connected chains. And as of today, just like a couple hours ago, that number is 3. So we had OKX's X layer chain connect to the Ag layer. We have Polygon ZKVM, obviously, and then we have A star. And so we can see each of these chains sort of touching Ethereum through a common smart contract. And we think that's like really powerful because that's ultimately where your performance gains come from.
Amazing. So Colin, let's bring you into this conversation. So a lot of traction for tokenization applications. And last call, we did talk about Libre, which is a tokenization specific ZKL2 rollup built with the Polygon CDK. The chain went live in March, giving eligible investors access to tokenized assets, tokenized funds from Brevin Howard and BlackRock. So first, how does Libre enable compliance for both asset issuers and investors? Is there a ZK privacy component here? And then second, does Libre plan on integrating with the Ag layer? And what use cases would this enable?
Yeah, Heidi, thank you so much for the questions. Those are great questions. In terms of how it enables compliance, because when you first spin up a CDK, you control the entire validator set, that permissioned nature allows you to know exactly who is operating on your chain. And I think we're at an important stage in the evolution because people have realized at this point that the private chains weren't working for what they wanted to do in terms of their use case. And so they can take a step in between private chains and public chains by using a permission chain, which allows you to open up over time. As regulation changes, as your legal department underwrites kind of new use cases or new access to different touch points within the blockchain universe, then you can open up as you choose and as you feel comfortable as an entity. So to get to the third question, does it plan to connect to the broader Ag layer? That's the roadmap. The idea is right now you have something very compliant that traditional finance firms feel very comfortable in putting their tokenized assets on because it's completely permissioned and everyone is KYC'd and so on and so forth. But it's also future-proofed because as more assets come in a disaggregated fashion or islands of liquidity, eventually the idea is you can connect all those islands. And I think that people don't understand how important and significant and revolutionary this change in the blockchain landscape is. Because right now, just to highlight how almost silly what we have now in terms of a user experience has become, it's like the idea that you have the stock market and every single purveyor or supplier of stocks has 5 stocks and there's 4,000 stocks. And not only that, each time you have to bridge assets between pools. The simple answer, call it, goes back to the late 90s internet, where eBay and Amazon were the two kind of predominant players where people were doing most of the business. And you would have to, each had a token in this case, and you would have to bridge assets. You change your eBay token, you bridge it out to Amazon, and you risk getting hacked in the meantime. Like that's a user experience that would never reach, probably, I don't know, a couple million people, let alone the billion people that every blockchain espouses. Every blockchain says we want to onboard 1 billion users, but their idea was, well, we would onboard it onto our blockchain. And given that each blockchain has different functionality and makes different trade-offs, that's just, in my view, it's not a reality. So what this Ag layer solves for is unified liquidity. And it becomes, to have a third analogy within 30 seconds, the TCP/IP layer of the blockchain. And that's the vision. And so what that does for institutions and for finance is creates a situation where it's no longer you have your assets on one chain and the thing that you want to purchase on another chain, and you have a complicated process to get from A to B. It becomes much more seamless. assets on chain A looking to do a DeFi transaction on chain B, in under 5 seconds, you don't even know that you're going cross chain, and you can complete your transaction with liquidity from one chain and desired execution on another. It's in my view, it's a very, very dominant paradigm, given that the current paradigm is, like 1995 for the internet, and we definitely need to get to 2024. And so this is, in my view, it's a massive leap in that direction, modernizing the entire blockchain ecosystem.
Yeah, agreed, particularly if we want to get mass adoption. So, Matt, in our last call, you had mentioned growth in the Polygon CDK ecosystem as a key development to watch out for this year. And since then, I think you've made a number of different announcements around multiple new CDK chains like Ariani, API3, Hypernetwork. Can you talk a little bit about the recent collaborations that you're excited about and what they bring to the ecosystem as a whole?
I'm unmuted. Okay, thanks, Heidi. Yeah, so I think for me the excitement comes around just like two things. Broadly, the depth of demand that we're seeing from developers to build L2s in our ecosystem is huge, right? We've got something like 100 chains in the pipeline. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so we kind of got off to like a slower start in July, August, playing a little bit of catch up. But now I think we're like fully in the throes of the demand for ag layer integration, because every L2 developer out there can see just how valuable it is to have that unified liquidity and the easy user onboarding and all that. So the first thing is just like the depth of it. The second is the diversity of use cases. So Ariani is like a great example. It's like consumer loyalty points with like a specific chain for it. And this can enable really high quality user experiences where like you could have gasless transactions. You could have transactions where the gas is subsidized by the merchant. You can have some merchants seeing what other merchants are doing and saying, hey, I like the demographic of customers that are going to XYZ merchant. I want to enable like a better, I want to like give a discount to them so that they come and try my product, right? And so we have this like global consumer passport, if you think about it that way. I think that's kind of how Ariani refers to it. And that's like really cool, right? Because that's real world adoption. So beyond Ariani, you have things like API3, which is like a much more crypto native use case, right? It's like Oracle extracted value. It's performing liquidations and giving the value either back to users, back to stakers, or some combination. And that's really cool because it's solving this like super crypto native problem that functions frankly much better on its own chain than it would on a set of other chains. And because they have like I think this is kind of lost on people. When you join the OP stack super chain, you have to adhere to a very specific set of guidelines as to how your block space is created, what your block space does. Something like API3, Oracle extracted value, like that's really complicated. And you have to construct your blocks in such a way that they are capturing that value. And with Polygon CDK, as long as you can prove it, you still get access to the aggregated liquidity, and our provers are like super flexible. So we can handle everything from like vanilla EVM chains, the way that OP Superchain can, all the way to like the really customized like niche crypto native stuff like API3. But I think one of the most exciting areas is really gaming. So this is things like Hypernetwork. To a degree, it's like A-Star. They're like very entertainment focused chain. It's things like IMX chain. And, we have a couple of like smaller, a little bit more crypto native studios, Wild World, Moonveil, each building their own L2 for their specific game or games. And this is great because when you're a gamer, like the last thing you want to do is get your game interrupted by something. And we can see like, we've seen this like historically, right? Where gamers for a long time really hated crypto because Ethereum miners were competing with gamers for the available supply of GPUs. And so as a gamer, anything that interrupts your ability to like experience gameplay and like really enjoy your game is like not a good recipe for user experience. Having your own chain really solves this problem where you don't have to compete with DeFi liquidations. You don't have to compete with Barland or NFT mints or whatever meme coin trading, right? And you can truly scale your block space to the degree of users that you have. And so gaming is like a really good application specific use case that we've also seen. And then just to highlight, I think the most exciting thing in terms of like CDK ecosystem and ag layer, definitely the X layer announcement today from OKX. This is big general purpose. They have 200 dApps building on there. They have integrations with like all of the like tier 1 players, Chainlink, Curve, EtherFi. They even have like LST stuff, Renzo, Swell. Swell is also building their own L2 on Polygon, which is pretty hype. And we also have Eigenlayer, right? Deploying on the OKX chain. And these are really hard hitting names. And so I think overall, like we have these like application specific chains, things like consumer, things like gaming, NFTs, whatever. And then we have the more general purpose chains that are going to be like hubs for DeFi and overall user onboarding. The onboarding experience from OKX to XLayer is going to be like uniquely smooth, right? And so I think overall it's super exciting to see. It's like any ecosystem, right, where you have like this diversity, these like big trees with roots sort of like deep in the ground, and then you also have the flora and fauna surrounding it, that feed off of each other, enable each other to grow bigger and stronger. And so I think overall it's just like a really exciting time. Like anything you can think of is basically building an L2 in the ag layer ecosystem.
Amazing. So 100 chains in the pipeline.
Yeah, 100 plus.
100.
It's pretty remarkable. I mean, we've really had to scale the BD side of things for L2 BD. We were one chain for a while, and then we were 2 chains, and now we're an ecosystem of chains, right? And when you do that, you have to substantially rethink, how am I going to best support the people building in my ecosystem? And so we like reallocated a whole bunch of resources internally to this like L2 BD effort. And we have, the best BD team in the business. I think it's like no exaggeration. And it takes a lot. It takes an army to deploy and resource 100 L2s to the degree that they need. And I think it's super exciting. We're just proceeding at an accelerating pace.
Amazing. Well, good problem to have for sure. So there's going to be a lot to talk about in the coming quarters. But so just sort of building on this conversation, and you mentioned A-Star, which was launched, ZK EVM, fully integrated with the ag layer. What does it mean for A-Star to be integrated? How does it differ from just being a Polygon CDK chain?
Good question. So the way that I think about it, it's actually kind of similar to Cosmos, where you can build with the Cosmos SDK and build whatever you want. I can run a blockchain right now on my laptop, right? And the other node can be my cell phone. That's kind of what Polygon CDK is, but for ZKL2s, right? So it's like a super easy to use open source software suite that allows you to build and deploy an L2 in like minutes. Right, it's really remarkable how easy it is to get going on this. But Cosmos SDK itself, while it was like a really great and continues to be a really great product, that wasn't the value proposition to the builder. Right, people built using the Cosmos SDK to access the interchain through IBC. That's being able to bridge assets and cross communicate across chains. And IBC itself had, some issues that are like a little deeper. I know we're like short on time today, so we can get into it later. But the ag layer kind of solves this because it uses ZK as that sort of common language, right? And so in the same way that like, signatures on transactions are this core cryptographic like primitive that allow for cross human communication. When I sign a transaction, it's me, right? The same thing sort of applies to ZK proofs, where these are cross machine communication that allow for like trusted communication of information, right? So the ag layer is sort of like this leveled up like IBC on steroids that also allows you to inherit security from Ethereum. And being plugged into the ag layer is like IBC enablement, right? So it's like if your chain is built on Cosmos SDK, but it's not IBC enabled, then you're missing a huge part of the value. Same thing with Polygon CDK. While it's like super great to be able to build and launch your own ZKL2, that's just like a small piece of the value proposition, right? Like you can go a lot further if you go together. And so being able to like plug into the ag layer means that you can share in that unified liquidity. You can share proving, once the full ag layer vision is live, you'll get these access to these features. You'll be able to share in proving, and it'll be much, much cheaper because you can consolidate your proofs with a lot of other chains in the ecosystem through, and that's why we call it the ag layer. We aggregate the proofs. And sort of like the first step in this is plugging into that shared contract on Ethereum. And that's what A-Star did just a few weeks ago. So it's like, it's really cool. Like I can't emphasize enough how cool it is to go into the Etherscan like view of the contract and look at that parameter that says like number of chains. And you can see in real time the growth of the Polygon like CDK ecosystem and the ag layer ecosystem. So it started at 1 with Polygon zkVM. Then it went to 2 with A-Star, and just today it hit 3. And we're doing nothing but accelerating. So that's kind of what it means. It's like A-Star is taking the first step in being able to take advantage of all these features once they're sort of more fully fleshed out. I would say later in the year.
So building off your excitement around sort of the development side of things, Colin, we had mentioned Libre earlier, but what other collaborations or ecosystem integrations are you most excited about that you can share with us?
The ones that I really want to share, I actually can't, fortunately for me, but I'm wildly excited. The challenge that I've had in the past year with traditional finance, which is where I see, call it the bulk of the activity, right? Like Wall Street trades thousands and thousands of times a second. And so if you're talking about users and adoption, if you're getting a significant chunk of that market, making it more efficient, lower cost, so on and so forth, then I think you're capturing a lot of the vision for the blockchain. Like, you're engendering a better world whereby, call it like the people that are paying 2 to 3% to use a Visa card are no longer paying that. It's like that, it's that kind of thing. If you'd have asked me a year ago what I see in terms of adoption, the problem is I would have, if we were like, I couldn't tell you then either, but I would rattle off like 10 names. You're like, oh my God, like the whole world is adopting blockchain. But the problem that I found is like, and the people that I am referring to subtly would probably laugh at this, but it's like their goal is to launch in September. And then like a month later, you get another document saying, hey, what about all these things? Can you answer these questions? And then it's like, okay, now we're going to launch a month later. And then it's like another month later. And then you get another document. And I don't know what happens in between those times. But I guess what I'm trying to say is the realities of adoption, and all these places are definitely coming. And they're the biggest names in the world. It's just that they take time, like much like turning the Titanic. I don't even know what the analogy is, but I've definitely had to temper my expectations. But I think I lose credibility. People are like, come on, you said this was happening months ago, and according to the people in the roadmap, it was. But now it's 2 weeks out, or now it's 2 months out. And I think people internally probably kind of poke fun at me for that. But I don't get
Is it regulation? Is it just complicated in terms of like integrating blockchain on their like legacy systems, or like? What are the main drivers for these delays?
You have to be extremely conservative when you're a global financial organization. Yeah. And so I think it is just quadruple checking before running a live product, because the risks are huge, right? If you altered the global financial system tomorrow and there was a problem, then heads are going to roll. People going to get fired, blamed. First off, the system doesn't function. Probably most important, millions and millions of dollars are lost. So in order to avert that, these huge conservative organizations have to take an incredibly deliberate approach. I actually don't think it's regulation. I think it's a function of, if you launch a product at the scale of, if you're beyond like 500 billion or a trillion in assets, or you're a giant international bank, you essentially have to work 100% of the time. And that means if you take an extra year in testing something to make sure that it's 100% viable and efficacious, then that's what you do. And my view is everybody is taking that time. And, quite frankly, they probably should. Because I'm more of a technologist, I just, I want to see it happen. I want to see it all become reality sooner rather than later. But I think the reality is that their caution is pretty warranted. And it's while the adoption is always there, it's already taken place in my mind. It's definitely coming, but it takes longer because it has to work 100% of the time upon the announcement and upon issuance of call it the product or the technology.
Makes sense. So to sum it up, we need to be patient, but it is coming, and we should watch because there will be announcements soon that we're going to be excited about.
I probably should have just said that like 5 minutes ago or whenever I started that. But yes, that's it.
So zooming out a little bit, so many crypto market participants have predicted that 2024 is the year of institutional crypto adoption. And I know we're talking about this, but from like the ETF launching tokenized funds on Libre, prediction is that we've had a strong start. But I guess, just building on what we were just talking about, what can be done to get institutions fully onboarded? You're on the front line, you're seeing it. Is there anything that can be done other than just patience and just being very methodical to make sure that things are, correct when they do go live?
Yeah, there's probably a couple answers to that. One, I think that would be good. I think that Matt probably has a good answer, and that would be use cases. And I would say, and he could actually probably go through those in a very detailed manner. But I would say from my perspective, it's two things. One, you need to launch the initial products on chain. And then two, you actually need that liquidity, that unified liquidity. I think those are the biggest help or hindrance to, well, they will dictate the time frame for institutional adoption in 2024. So you're seeing the products. You saw some early products this year. I think you're going to see many more, but the challenge once the products are launched are still that kind of siloed liquidity. You have to be on this chain or that chain. Once we get further along into this ag layer thesis and roadmap, that's going to be one solution. But there's also going to need to be mechanics that take place to bring all the new digital exchanges that are coming online to exchange liquidity. And I know from my conversations, there's a handful of these places that would like to be the place where digital assets trade, including security token offerings, and they're regulated. But the reality is if you spring up one in 10 different countries and they each have 10% of the global liquidity, I also don't think that's a solution that's going to excite a lot of people, and it's not going to result in heavy usage of those systems. So ag layer is a partial solution, but I also think there's going to need to be arrangements made between these. And actually at Polygon is kind of a locus of liquidity or a nexus. I think part of what we're going to wind up doing is connecting these players or helping them connect to each other in such a way that it does achieve that goal of unified liquidity. So sorry for the multi-part answer.
No, that works. Wow, 30 minutes goes by so fast. We're coming up on time. Let's see, maybe we can just close this out with Matt. Like one thing you want us to take away from this discussion and what we should be paying close attention to over the next quarter.
I mean, keep an eye on the ag layer. That's my number one thing. I mean, we're going to see so many chains launch, so many chains join, so many chains bring users into the ag layer ecosystem. And as that grows, it's a network effect. And as more liquidity comes in, more liquidity is going to get drawn in. As more users come in, more apps are going to build. More apps building means more users, more liquidity, and the flywheel is just getting started. So keep an eye on the ag layer.
Amazing. Colin, last word.
I was just terrified that Matt was going to say dog with hat. That's the future, right? It's the ag layer. That is what creates the user experience that allows for mass adoption. So definitely focus on how that evolves, because that's going to set the tone for accelerated adoption for a lot of the theses in blockchain, including institutional.
Great. Thank you so much, Colin, Matt. Always amazing to catch up with you both. Great start to the year. Certainly a lot to be excited about, and look forward to having another conversation next quarter.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you.